And thank you for introducing us. May I approach the crowd and the crowd behind our crowd? Join us. It's not only sports here. It's a lot more. It's about life. Hi there. Join us. This is going to be a very exciting discussion. So if you'd like, there is a coffee spot. Pick a coffee, sit down, join us, and enjoy the talk. So may I introduce our guest to you in a bit more detail. It's a pleasure to welcome you on stage, Dr. Vlad Marinescu. Now, the introduction is not going to be too short because you're president of the International Esport Federation, Director General of the International Judo Federation, Chief Media and Marketing Officer of the same Judo Federation. You have spent over 15 years in international sports world. From junior years in active sport, then to event organization, then several levels of sports administration, and now into sports diplomacy. You're 7 times junior karate US champion. Amazing. I mean, how can you do that? Additionally, junior Olympic champion in water polo. Now, come on, for Hungarians, the water polo champion is a god. So there you go. Additionally, you're a successful entrepreneur. I think it's extremely impressive. You were born in Romania, then raised and studied in California, and now, for our pleasure, living and working in Budapest. And now here's I think one of the most impressive parts about Vlad. He also speaks Hungarian. I don't know how. Learned as an adult. So are you okay with switching to Hungarian first?
Persze indulunk magyarul, köszönöm szépen, hogy itt tudom lenni veletek, és tudom is valami mondani magyarul, tehát másfél éves magyar vagyok most.
Akkor hadd legyen ez az első kérdésem, hogy sikerült megtanulni felnőttként magyarul, ráadásul ilyen jól?
Köszönöm szépen, Orsi. Szerintem, ha meglakod valahova több mint 2 évek, kell adni a országa a tisztelet, mutatni a tisztelet, és tanulni a nyelveit is egy picit. Nagyon szeretem Magyarországon, szeretem a kája is, a kultúra is, a embereken, szerintem a legjobb embereken világon. És a nyelv szerintem az ad egy másik dimenzió a barátságnak. És mikor tudsz valakivel beszélni a neki anyanyelveben, biztos sok hibák megcsináltam, és a nyelvtan nem ismerem, és nem tanultam magyarul könyvvel vagy tanárral. De szeretem beszélni, és szerintem minden hónap, minden nap fogok jobban tudni beszélgetni.
Ez egészen biztos, de lenyűgöző már így is. But I let you be a bit more comfortable with English. But later on, if you have some questions, feel free to approach him also in Hungarian if you have any issues with your English. So back to your story, because I think, okay, we're going to speak about fair play as well, but I think your story is incredible, and I'd like to ask you to tell us a bit about that. As I said in the intro, you were born in Romania, then soon landed in California. However, not in the California that we've seen in the Barbie movie just the other day, have we? But in the poorest areas. So you started off really from the poor part of the United States, being the only white kid in school. I mean, we can't really imagine that, can we? So how was that? How did you manage as a kid with such a challenging environment?
So now in English, where I can actually speak my mind without having to think so much. First of all, hello to everyone. I'm sure everyone's enjoying lunch. Thank you for being with us in the heat. Thank you, Orshi, for the invitation to spend a little bit of time with you and maybe share some of my life experiences that have attributed to me being who I am today. As you did mention, I did blush a little bit in that introduction, and it's quite humbling to hear the long CV already partaken, but what I can tell you is that the beginning is one of the most important things, and how you live your life with what objective and what morals attributes to ultimately what you will achieve. It's the motivation of having a target. And as you mentioned, I did grow up poor. I grew up in a city that is the #1 crime city in the region, And I was one of the few white people in school, let's say, surrounded by Mexicans, and por eso hablo también español un poco. But
Muy buen.
I can tell you that it was very understandingly important to me, the fact that I have been doing martial arts my whole life, that allowed me to physically survive that environment and to morally charge and develop myself to be able to handle lots of other challenges later in life.
And how was life as one of the few white kids in that area? I mean, as a small child, you definitely have different experiences than having such challenges as an adult.
Well, I was raised by a single mother, me and my sister, so she was working nonstop, and I had to adapt and develop very quickly to the environment to be alone. I made the huge mistake that I did during the talent show, a demonstration of karate. And after showing the school that I knew something about martial arts, the challenge every day came out. Every day after school, in the backyard of the school, someone was fighting Vlad, until there was no one left in the school. So then the middle school started to approach with challenges, and finally the high school is when I learned how to be more humble and how to understand that maybe I'm not the quickest or the fastest or the strongest, which ultimately is what martial arts teaches you, and what discipline teaches you is that value of respect, and to be always humble. And that's how I approach every topic in my life.
You mentioned your mom, and I think she's extremely inspiring. You told me about her a bit. Being a single parent, she managed to build her own business while taking care of you in a foreign country. I think she's amazing. Can you tell us just a bit about her? I find it very interesting and inspiring.
I'll tell you two stories. One is, of course, I love my mother. She is the strongest woman I know. She's a scorpion. I think that tells a lot of it. I don't understand how she had the energy to be able to survive in a new country, in a new language, in a new culture, while raising and supporting two children. It takes a lot of strength, and when I commend her today about it, now that she lives in the richest part of the city and enjoys a life where she drives to her beauty school to teach every morning and then does yoga after that, she told me the reason and what made her able to do that, to work Monday to Saturday from 6 in the morning until 10 at night, and spend Sundays with her children, taking them hiking or gardening or shopping or whatever it was, is that she had no other choice. So she's not proud of her ability or her achievements, but nem volt más lehetőség. Or she did it or she didn't do it. So definitely I commend her for that. On the other hand, when I came to Hungary, I finished military school in San Diego, and I had the opportunity to play water polo at USC or to go the military way to University of San Marcos in California. And I chose to come to Budapest to study in Hungary. So my scorpion mother, she said, if you leave, you're out of the family. Call me when you're starving, and I'll send you a ticket home. Which was quintessentially the biggest motivation to never call her and to survive, as well as starting out fresh in a new country, in a new environment with all the things that I learned so far, all the baggage and all the understanding.
Wow, yeah. And you said when we prepared for this discussion that we already found from poor boy to rich boy that led you to the bad boy and then to military school. So how, from the perspective of now, how do you see that development in your life? So was it natural? Was it hard? Was it easy because you had no choice yourself? Or what did it teach you?
It's a very good question. From poor boy to rich boy to bad boy to good boy to leader. It's interesting evolution. I gotta be completely honest. I think one of the most important things in this life, and many people studying at MCC understand this, is the experience that you gain and the things that you learn. And sometimes reading in a book isn't enough to be able to give you a real understanding of how things work and how life is and how to react to environments and situations. So in my core, probably, seeing all of those steps and starting from the bottom, let's say, with the target to never reach the bottom again, was not only a motivator to always be running and always be going forward, but also, ultimately, it was the understanding that with all of that experience, I'd like to give something back to people, to teach them something, or maybe if I share with you a funny story today in this hour that you're taking out of your lunch, maybe that helps you to learn something else that ultimately will lead you to going through the same cycle in a different way. But what I believe and the way I try to structure it is that when we're born, we start to do a track of life. We start to run or to crawl, let's say, because you're a baby. And there is a great track of life, and here in Hungary we're going to have the pleasure next month to see the Athletics World Championship. So speaking about track and field and running, when you're born, some people are born 100 tracks before, and some people are born 100 tracks into the future. Whether you're born into, let's say, a family that's more modest, or whether you're born into a family of history and culture and, blue blood. Now, when you're born, you start to advance the track of life, and it's all of our objectives and mission to keep moving and keep growing and keep developing. So first, we're crawling on this great track of life, and as we gain more experience, we start to walk slowly, or limp, and then we walk, and then we jog, and then we should start sprinting, and eventually, step by step, through our experiences and through our development process, we can even get a bicycle, and then a motorcycle, and then a car, and a race car, and so on, until we're finally on a rocket ship on the track of life. And imagine this track that we have just defined, and imagine that you have actually several different tracks in your life. One is your physical track. One is your mental. One is your family. One is your business. One is your intellectual track of life. One is your spiritual and your emotional and your energetical. And it's very important, no matter how many laps behind or laps ahead you've been born in one or another track of life, to try to find balance. We're humans, right? How many feet do we have? We have 2 feet. Can you walk on 1 foot? Not very effectively. Not very far. Not very comfortably. So I think the purpose in life, and I know this answer has gotten long, but I wanted to make this point. The purpose in life is to always be balanced and work on developing yourself and growing yourself, ultimately to benefit other people.
Yeah, I think this balance is a good word to build upon, because what I'd like to ask you, going back to this poor boy, rich boy, bad boy, good boy, etc. So having this background that you have, or the background that your first school had, for example, it could have led to a very different you, could have led to a very different life. So where do you think, or how could we notice or acknowledge the point where a decision needs to be made, whether I'm going the right way or the wrong way, whether I'm becoming now a good boy from all that background, or I'm even a worse boy. So, it's very similar to when there is a drug problem or any kind of addiction with a person. Where's the point of no return one way or the other? You have maybe a family background where, I don't know, parents smoke or are having alcohol problems. What is the difference whether the children will be the same or totally different? What is the turning point?
I think that there's no real one way to live this world. And I think that everyone has their own perception or ideologies of what is right and wrong. And of course, we share a lot of views. And of course, commonly we can agree on certain things being right and certain things being wrong. And for everyone, that progress is different. That's what makes humanity and life so beautiful, that there's a plethora of abilities and potentials that you can reach in your life, and targets you can set in your life. For me, one common point that all of us have together is sport and physical movement. And that's why I dedicate my time and my energy and my passion into sport. Because in my life, sport has saved me, literally, when I was a kid. And also saved me throughout the course of my life when I was maybe going in the wrong direction every single time. Anytime I've had a dilemma, a doubt, a crisis, a misunderstanding, purely being alone with yourself and jogging or running or walking, depending on your physical ability, that process of being alone and exercising and sweating and crying and bleeding and achieving a development of one's body and mind together has always led me in the right direction. We have, as human beings, I think we have two different parts of our thought process or our thinking process. We have our mental, analytical, binary thinking that generates a result or an answer dependent upon our experiences and what we have done in our life. So I know that this water is definitely going to be cold because I can see it's forming on the exterior some small discoloring. That's through my experience, and my mind knows it, and I know it. The second one is our heart. Our heart that leads us in a direction also according to our experiences. One is more analytical, and one is, let's say, superhuman. Because for some reason, our heart sometimes leads us in a complete dark alley that makes absolutely no sense, but turns out to be something very enjoyable for development and for oneself. Decisions, usually, your question was, how do you know when you're going in the wrong direction or the right direction? The first is your own feeling. Your own feeling will always be more important than anyone else's feeling. What your mind says and what your heart says. And when both say the same thing, when both your heart and your mind say yes, it's a yes. When both say no, it's a no. There's no in between. There's no gray zones. And I think we'll get there later with the gray zones and fair play in sport. The problem is when your mind says yes and your heart says no. Now, how to deal with that and analyze that, that's called art. But the second point that let's say, affirms that idea, so I know this is a bad thing. Sitting here on this stage and sharing a little bit of ideology with Orshi and with our friends that are watching is a good thing and a bad thing both in itself. But the second point is what people tell you back. So they say, you're doing good, congratulations. That's a nice thing you did by going there. That reaffirmation from the outside environment is something that we need as humans and something that we have to always be open to, even if it's the wrong answer. Even if the answer from the outside is, no, bad boy, that was not the good thing to do. And you think it was, analyze it, think with your heart, think with your mind, and you'll have the solution.
Well, back to sports, you said that sports helped you. So let's check our audience, shall we? Raise your hands. Who did sports today? Oh, come
really?
on. Honestly.
I don't see your hand up, Orshi.
Oh, sorry. No, actually, I didn't. I'm sorry. I had to get up very early in the morning, and usually I do running in the evening. So I'm free here. But honestly, only just two of you? Oh, come on. You need to do something. So maybe stand up, turn around, and sit down again. I don't know, move around a bit. That will help.
It's an interesting question, this one with the sport I love. And I've been speaking a lot through my life in forums of sport and everything from sport ministries to people studying to master's students in sport. And I love this question. Who did sport this morning? We had two hands. There are two of us that were crazy this morning. Who did sports this week from Monday till today? Now we get a good answer, right? So now I'm more comfortable. But when you're in a room and you say, who did sport this week, and no one puts their hand up, you're thinking, oh, maybe we need to take everyone out for a run rather than speak.
Okay, we can organize that later. But I think it was also a good question to ask because now let's move on to sports, but also to esports. You're head of the Esports Federation. Now, I think many of my age would say, okay, esports is no sports. So just please clarify, is esports sport? Is it healthy?
Okay.
Sorry.
So first, let me speak about judo for just 5 minutes because judo is my heart, and judo is what made me. So with judo, in 2003, I came to Hungary. My mother disowned me. We already got past that point. And the person that is he's my third father, but I consider him to be just my father, period, because third reflects an addition of the third one of importance or whatever. So, like my father, Marius Wieser, the president of Judo, he hired me in the European Judo Union office as office staff. And that's the first touch that I had with judo in my life, and the first touch that I had with a combat sport. Coming from martial sports, I did judo in my martial arts training. I have a black belt in jiu-jitsu, I have a black belt in karate, I have a black belt in judo hopefully soon also. I haven't had the time to make that materialistically done yet. But I know how to throw, and I've been thrown, and clearly I've been fighting my whole life. So it was the first time in my life when I understood the values and principles that he, Mr. Wieser, bestowed upon me or required me to have. And these values are the judo principles and the judo values, and they're values that I think in life, if you want to have a successful and productive life and you want to be interacting with your environment in a correct way and attract to you the group of people that will reflect who you are to the public, you need to live your life with principles. Honor and respect and courage are some of the most important principles that I have, and they reflected very closely with me because I went to military school. And I was a cadet captain and company commander at Army Navy Academy in San Diego, so I became a leader, and I went through OCC, Officers Candidates course, and I learned about values and principles in leadership, and seeing them in judo and seeing them in sport, and seeing them around the people that are in the sport movement helped me to start and devote myself to sport. So before esports, I want to say with judo, in 2007, Mr. Wieser was elected president of the International Judo Federation. And he had this crazy idea to go from one event every second year to 12 events in 2009. Now, I studied business and finance. I finished Oxford Brookes University, bachelor degree. Actually, it was at the EBS here in Budapest, so that was fun. I've never organized an event in my life, and I studied business and finance. And I got thrown into organizing 12 events a year around the world. So I traveled the whole world, 12 different countries in 2009, and I had the pleasure to implement his strategy and his ideology. Now, I'm sure here in Hungary, you have to deal with lots of different people. Try dealing with 12 different cultures of 12 different countries of 12 different teams and making them produce the same goulash. Some with chicken, some with beef, some with whatever you want, and keep that taste in the final product coming out. And the reason why I mentioned judo is because judo is an example that we achieved that, and the team grew, and we have here in Hungary, next weekend, the Judo Masters. The best of the best are coming to participate in the Pap Laszlo Arena. Of course, everyone is invited to watch judo when you would like to see people throwing each other around with values and principles and respect. Esports was something that I got into some years later because through judo, I became a man, let's say. And when I saw esports, I had gamed as a kid. I did play Counter-Strike and different games with my friends, and of course, that's what kids do, and it's very fun. And I'll answer your question about that development. But the first idea of getting involved in esports came to me when I was in California in 2015-16. And I realized that children that are playing games and having fun, and we're talking about 3 billion plus people that are in gaming around the world. We're talking about an industry that's $170 billion last year, bigger than sports, music, movies combined. We're talking about a phenomenon where everybody here, everybody at this festival, I'm sure has at least 5 games installed on their iPhones or Samsung tablets. I'm sure everybody here is equally participating in this activity. And this activity is fun. And your question, Orsi, was, is esports a sport? You can define a sport as any activity that humans compete against each other in that requires skill, practicing, and the objective is to ultimately win and be better. the first sport. Do you know which is the first sport? If you had to guess, and it's BC. It's before Christ.
I'd still say running.
Hunting.
Oh, hunting. Yeah.
And hunting became the first sport where the tribes would come together, and whoever hunted the bigger animal or the one animal we all went after would be the winner and the champion, became spear throwing, which is now a discipline in athletics, and we'll see it here in Hungary next month. As humanity developed, as technology developed, more sports came to be. We had Formula One here last week, which, by the way, very impressive for Hungary and the strategy of the country to have so many amazing sporting events that motivate the youth to be healthy and have an interest in sport. Formula One, let's say, is definitely a sport which requires technology and vehicles and is not so easy to do without skill. Esports requires computers, so I would say esports would be probably the newest sport. And the reason it's a sport is because it requires a mental dexterity. And in esports, you have everything from, on one side, things that are completely physical, and on the other side, things that are completely mental. So what would be completely physical? Probably digital cycling, like swift cycling, when you get on the bike and you cycle, and depending on how well you cycle, that's the result of the e-sport, or the sport, digital sport, or the sport digitization. And on the other side is something like chess, where it doesn't matter how fast my hand can move that piece, or how amazingly soft I set it back on the board without noise. If you're mentally stronger than me, you're going to beat me. And everything in between. So, esport is definitely a sport.
Is it healthy?
If you're doing the side which is completely sportization, of course it's healthy. When you speak about the health of a person, what kind of health would you judge a person on? I'm guessing there would be 3 types of health, right? Mental, physical, social. Yep. Plus probably some other, depending on who you speak to. Physical health is vitally important to do. Mental health is equally important to do. And social health, of course, is equally important to do. They're the 3 balancing tracks that we spoke about before. Playing video games and participating in esports is not progressing you physically. However, the dexterity that you're learning by being able to achieve 20 actions on a computer in 1 second are going to prepare you for the jobs of tomorrow. Learning the multitasking abilities of being able to work with teammates to achieve an objective, to use technology, it's preparing you for the jobs of tomorrow. Watching those graphics and those games and entering into those environments where we lose our physical self and we become digital is preparing you for tomorrow, where we live more and more in a digital environment, in a digital space, and the jobs are less and less physical and more mental. That being said, to be successful in esports, you have to be successful physically. So the reason why I got involved in esports is because I would ultimately like every single person who plays esports to also do some type of physical sport. And I think that the collaboration and recognition of esports as a sport by governments around the world, and we see that more and more every day, passing legislation, Sweden being the most recent European country where esports is recognized as a sport, will allow to apply the values of sport and physical practices to the people that are participating in esports. So esports is the last chance that we can get kids to move. And don't feel as if you think that playing esports makes kids not move. It's life in general. YouTube is equally guilty for people's behavioral changes to be more or less socially involved and be more digitally involved.
It's somehow a bit scary, though, because it reminds me of the movie Ready Player One. I'm pretty sure many have seen it. It's really, are these games really preparing you for the future? I'm a bit scared about that, but I totally get it, and I'm very glad that there's someone top of Esports Federation who is also really concerned about the physical health, because I see many youngsters just hours in front of the computer, and then you hardly get them to, physical exercises or to sleep, because they would play all night, and it's a bit scary. But let me ask you something else, and now going into fair play. And let's stick first to this digital world. How does fair play work in esports or in the digital era? Because very often when you're in the digital metasphere or wherever, you're faceless, or there's someone doing sports. Sorry. So when you're in the digital field and you're nameless, you're faceless, you're easier to cheat, to be unfair, to brag on one hand and then bully on the other. How does that work in your experience in esports? Are the players fair?
Before I answer that, I just want to mention one thing, because you said that playing video games, your kids don't want to sleep. Playing esports, they don't want to sleep. And this is something that I like to say a lot. When I was in high school, on Friday after school, me and my friends would all get together at somebody's house, and we would connect computers together, and we would take the router from school and reprogram it. And we would play games all weekend long without sleeping until Sunday, when we all went back home to go to school on Monday. And this is a point that you mentioned. There's an ability that I learned from doing this, is that I don't need to sleep to be functional. When I've heard many people who need to actually sleep to be functional, without their 8 hours or 10 hours or 6 or whatever it is, they cannot function. I have an ability during the, let's say, Olympic Games, when we organize judo. For those 2 weeks, I sleep 1 hour per night for 2 weeks. And the whole process goes on. And it's something that I learned from that. So I think even that's a skill, the lack of sleep that prepares you for the future life, or if that's a thing to do or not. Now, about the fair play and about losing our identity. I think we have to track the history of the internet. So, when the internet first came to be, many of you probably were too young to know when the internet came about, but the first thing in the internet is that we had something called screen names. It was the first alias, and my first alias was Mr. Silver Skater, because I don't know why that was it, but people didn't know me as Vlad Marinescu, they knew me as Mr. Silver Skater. And the internet was set up in such a way that everyone had their fake aliases online. They were hiding behind a mask, a digital mask. And by hiding behind this digital mask, as all humans are, when no one is watching and no one knows it's you, you're a lot more able to do things you would normally not do. You're a lot more hurtful. You don't bear the consequences of your actions. I think they call them keyboard warriors, the ones that, because they're not physically in your proximity, feel very brave. And Facebook was the first to change this. So when Zuckerberg came out with the idea of Facebook, the idea was that it was my face and my name and my real friends. That's why I had to add you, and you had to confirm me. Thereby, he was creating the real world in a digital realm. And if you have your real name and your real face, then you're a lot less likely to say some hurtful things or act a certain way. In the esports world, we can see through technology, so now for cheating, through technology, of course, it's getting more and more difficult for people to cheat. And ultimately, cheating is something that you should not do in any way, because you destroy your ability to develop yourself to not have to cheat. You pretend to win. And you pretended to win, and the win is not as gratifying or as solidifying as it should be. So I believe the internet and the humanity is moving more to a phase that maybe I am Mr. Silver Skater, but clearly in the database I know, and they know, and you know who I really am. As we can see on Instagram, and TikTok is trying to go back now to the facelessness because of the age demographic. But more and more, I think that the digital realm will include a considerable link to your physical self. Even as we move towards the Ready Player One era of VR, you'll actually have your real face and your real name in one version. And in the other version, your Yang will be a fake self that's God knows who knows what color and what robot from what dimension and does what kind of crazy things.
Still very, very interesting for me. It's a bit far, but yeah, let's stick to fair play. Let's define it, because when I started to think about, I'm a sports person myself. I did sports all my life, but fair play is not just about not cheating. It's a lot more. But again, I'm looking for a borderline here. I tell you a story of a personal story. I played tennis, and when I was in my teens, I had a good tournament. I've been in the final, and I've played quite well. I was leading. But I just realized after maybe the first set, can't remember exactly, that my opponent wasn't feeling well. And I asked her, it wasn't a huge Wimbledon-like tournament, so we sat on the same bank during the breaks. So I asked her, "Are you okay?" And she told me that she hadn't eaten anything for hours. And I knew there was a chocolate bar in my bag, so I thought, okay, well, I have a chocolate, so have it. She ate it and then beat me. So was that fair play, or have I been totally out of my mind?
It's a very good story. It's a very good story. Short term, you were out of your mind.
Yeah, I was afraid.
But long term, you made the right move because you wanted to beat that person at their full ability. How could you live with yourself, and how could you explain to yourself that I'm the champion when you know you had a candy bar and you know she was suffering? So cheating is all about little fake steps. And so is fair play. Fair play is achieving that which you are and being at the level that you are and developing yourself. You cannot develop yourself if you don't lose. Losing causes people to develop, which causes people to win, which sometimes causes people to get lazy, which sometimes causes people to lose. And the cycle goes on and on and on. So when you cheat, I believe the difference between who you are, and all of us know who we are and where we are and what we know, what we do, what we're capable of doing. When we're at a certain level, but we pretend online or to the outside world that we're on another level, the difference is called unhappiness. Because you always have to compensate that difference. And always when you go to sleep at night, if you're not gaming, when you sleep at night and you're with yourself, you'll know that you cheated, and the beauty of the victory isn't as beautiful. I truly believe that, and I mean, tennis is a good example. I'm a habitual cheater in sport games that I'm not good at that require physical contact. So basketball. I'm not very good at basketball. I've never played basketball, but I'm 1 meter 91 tall and almost 100 kilos. So clearly I'm going to use my physical advantage to elbow my way underneath the rim and get the ball every time that someone misses the shot. Is it cheating? Maybe.
Germans have a good word for that, jein. No.
Tennis, for example, I had the pleasure to learn tennis, and I have been married before. I'm happily divorced now. And my old father-in-law told me, he said, if you want to marry my daughter, you have to learn how to play tennis. So I started and gave that a go. And as this habitual, let's say, cheater in tennis, the adversary is 25 meters away. There's no way to influence them in a physical way. But there is by not giving them a candy bar. So fair play, because that's the purpose of this discussion, right? Fair play is being fair, I think, to yourself, first and foremost, and not lying to yourself about who you are and where you are. When this applies to sport or to studies or to anything, I mean, let's be honest, this is a discussion of studying. If you go to your test in the morning and you just pick that one topic that you studied that one night before and you got lucky and you passed, you're going to create again an instability in your life, which later on is going to cause a weak foundation. And a weak foundation means that you'll never be able to actually grow and develop. Now, if you studied every single topic that day or the night or the months before, and you're ready for them, and you pass that exam, what's going to make you more happy? In the short term, probably cheating and having the one that they got chosen by luck and you passing without any effort. But in the long term, talking about developing yourself and becoming a good person, the second part that was more difficult, long term, will develop you better.
Do you think, but I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you. Do you think that sports people are more fair in their professional and personal life as well?
I am the person I am today because of sport. And because I had the right mentors and the right role models in my life. As I mentioned before, Mr. Wieser for me is one role model. And it's a very good question in the sense that when you practice sport, you learn that the only person you can rely on in a physical sport or in an individual sport is yourself. And you understand quite quickly that your decisions of how much effort to put in are equal to the result of what you get out. I truly believe that by practicing sport, you become a better person, or a better person of yourself, a better version of yourself. Because everyone is their own people, and everyone's version of what is good or bad is different. What we had with the good boy, bad boy discussion. But by doing sport, you exercise yourself and develop your abilities and your potential to the maximum possible ability. So I'm not saying that hiring a sport person is better than hiring a non-sport person. I'm saying that a person who does sport becomes a better person than what they would become if they did not. Because they learn about losing, and they learn about striving and fighting and clawing and putting in effort for an objective. And that creates solitude, and that creates discipline. And discipline is the ultimate requirement for a successful life. And we mentioned some sporting events. I mean, Hungary is my home, and I am now for a year and a half a Hungarian citizen. And I moved here from the United States. And I truly believe that the policy in this country to have big sporting events, to support big sporting events, does a couple different things. First of all, by supporting sport, you support healthy citizens who are strong physically and mentally. And these strong people are going to ultimately lead your future. Hungary has been in the Olympic Games, top 10 medal table for the past ever.
Past ever, yeah.
Forever and ever. This small country has been top 10, small in terms of population, top 10 in the medal table. Why do you think every time you travel to another country and you say, I'm from Hungary, everyone understands where Hungary is? Because of the marketing generated by the amazing sporting results. So to answer your question, sport is a fundamental requirement for a happy and healthy humanity, for a society that understands value. And I will always prefer hiring someone who does sport over someone who doesn't do sport, because they have developed and they understand discipline.
I've told you, maybe the audience does not know, there is an MCC Leadership Academy where I also mentor some students. So let me ask you a bit about leadership, because I think there is a lot to learn from you in this aspect as well. You say, and I see it as well, that your leadership style is leading by example. Give us a story about that, because I think there's a lot to learn about.
So leading by example is one of the core principles, I think, of life. And I'm sure that all of you have leaders, right? So think about your favorite course ever in university. At uni, what's your favorite course? And that's going to answer you, what's your favorite course? Think about it. And who teaches that course? That's probably your favorite teacher. That's probably a teacher that you respect Because you look at that person and you go, that person loves what they do. They're passionate. They know their stuff. They actually want to be here, and they motivate you. Your favorite course will always be the course of your favorite teacher, which will always be the person that is leading you by example. In my life, I remember, and this is something that I've taken with me since I was a kid. There are 2 points, and I know the story we talked about, but I'd like to tell a story maybe 20 years before that leads to that story. So I was a kid at my grandma's house, and she had like all grandparents' porcelain, right? So we all have the vitrines filled with porcelain in Eastern Europe. And I was, I think, 3 or 4 years old, and I opened the thing, barely opened it, and I grabbed some porcelain, and I was trying to play with it. And my grandmother caught me. So normal reaction, right? One of two, I'm going to get spanked or not. My grandmother sat me down on her leg, and she goes, come here, sit down. She says, look at your hands. You see your hands? And I looked at my little tiny hands. She says, you see how small your hands are? She says, everything in this vitrine, everything in this house is yours. But with these small hands now, you're going to break it. You're going to break your stuff. So whenever you want to see it, let me know. We'll take everything out. We'll play with it. We'll put it back so we can make sure that you don't break your stuff. So the reason I told that story is because that taught me or gave me the understanding that when I work with people, I like to give them an explanation why it's yes or why it's no, in order for them to develop and understand the reasoning behind something. Because when a person is ordered to go left, they'll go left, depending on how much they trust in you or how much you pay them or how afraid they are of you. But when a person understands that there's water on the left and we're thirsty, you don't need to tell them to go left anymore. They'll go left themselves. So it's about motivating people to understand the objective in order to achieve it. And the example, 20 years later, I had the pleasure of being sent to Switzerland in 2013 on July 1st. I was Director General of an organization called Sport Accord. Sport Accord is the union of all international sport federations, from FIFA to fishing and everything in between. So the first job when I arrived was that I had to organize 3 months later the World Combat Games. And the World Combat Games, which of course martial arts is dear to my soul, judo is my heart. I know these sports very well. I've practiced them. It was like a perfect fit for me to arrive there, to have to organize the event of my heart sports. No contracts, no venues, no plans, no equipment, no broadcasting, absolutely not an idea of what they would do in 3 months. Give that a go. I had the pleasure before, of course, of organizing all the judo events, so I had experience in event organization. I love doing events, and if you ask me what's my core, I'm an event organizer or a fixer. And I told the team when I arrived to the office, I would arrive at 6 in the morning in the office with nobody there. In Switzerland, they're very Swiss, they're very by the clock. So at 8:59 on the elevator that arrived at 8:59, they couldn't fit into the elevator. All the office, 8:59 arrived to the office, 12 o'clock out to lunch, 1:29 back because Switzerland has an hour and a half of lunch, and 4:59 out again. Clearly, no passion, no motivation, no leadership, nobody to lead them in the right direction. And step by step, as we started on our path to organize that mega event, as everyone understood, I told them, we will do this event. Either we achieve the event or we don't do it. But after these 3 months, we're going to know who will be in this team and who not. I could see people start to feel that. I mean, I'm sure arriving to the office and seeing the general director in this office already working probably makes you feel a little bit odd. And seeing him still there when you're leaving makes you feel even odder. Mixed with the passion of having a target and an objective, resulted that step by step I would see marketing lights on, multi-sport lights on, integrity lights on. People started to actually love what they do and started to follow the example. So lead by example. Don't ever ask anyone to do something you haven't done or you wouldn't do yourself. and you'll end up having a pretty good team. And you'll end up having a good team around you, which ultimately will have bigger successes in the things that you do.
Yes. Let me ask you one more thing about these events. You said you had organized this judo event in 12 different countries. How did you manage this leading by example with very different cultures? I think, our students also in Leadership Academy, but in MCC definitely generally, will have international experience. They will have multinational tasks. So how do you manage this? Because you have your background, you have your culture, you have your family. But for example, in Asia or South America, people simply react differently to things. So how did you manage that?
I was very young when this first started, and I was a martial artist. So at the beginning, very aggressively, until I actually learned the job and learned the culture better. The way you manage it, first of all, is with respect. Goes back to the values of judo, which I mentioned before, the values that I think every human should have. So when you approach any topic of any culture, the first thing is respect for the other person. And this is about anything in life. It's about becoming a human and understanding that even the person that is picking up the trash is a human, that's a person that should be respected. And every person has something to contribute. And I find that this is a uniting aspect of all the cultures of the world. That a person who you show respect to will show respect back to you. The second, of course, is being educated and knowing things very dearly and understanding exactly theoretically what needs to be done. People, to give you respect back, they need to understand that what you do is something that isn't so easy to do and understand you put work into it. When you travel the world, and I wish for all of you to travel as much as possible and to understand from every culture their similarities and their particularities. When you give a business card to somebody in China, let's say, or Japan, you give the business card with two hands, not with one. And I remember the first time I was in Japan and I was exchanging business cards, I kind of threw my business card on the table in front of the person, and the Japanese person came to me, stood up around the table with two hands, and gave me the card like that. And I felt so terrible that from that moment on, anytime I gave a business card to anyone in Asia, it was like that, with respect. So the answer to your question is that there is no actual answer to it. You need to be a sponge. And by sponge, I mean everything you see, everything you try, everything you do, you need to absorb something and remember something. If you don't remember what you did yesterday, then you wasted your day. Everything you do, you have to remember. So now I see the water has no more funny outside shading. I know it's room temperature and ready to drink. Observe everything. Remember everything you can. And by that way, you'll expand your mental capacity. Always be a sponge. That's probably the answer.
Shall this be our takeaway? Because I thought, as a final question, our time is running up, is to ask you for a takeaway for our students, for our audience. And I feel a bit odd now, because I think being a sponge is the best takeaway that they can get. But still, let me ask you, what would you say to MCC students who have this amazing opportunity of learning from the best professors, from practical acting leaders? They need. Sometimes they value it, sometimes they don't. This is all natural because they have it. What would you say them? What's the? How should they approach the years with MCC so that they really make the most out of it as a sponge?
It's a very hard one to beat, the sponge question, right? Because that's just a principle you're going to live with. It's a good way to think about it. I like to think about it a different way because, I'm a habitual procrastinator. I like to leave things to the last minute. And I say it's because it challenges me and it makes me, bring out the best in me. I don't prepare the questions. For example, or she was trying to show me the questions that she would ask me today, and I said, no, I want to answer honestly, and I want to fight to answer it. I would say the first most important thing is make sure you love what you do. Money is irrelevant. Money will come when you do that which you love. Love what you do. Be passionate about it. If you don't love what you do, if you don't like what you're studying, don't do it. How old do we live? I don't know, 80 years old, 90? Let's say 100 years old, we live 100 years, more or less, and there are more or less 300 days in a year, so we live probably 30,000 days on average. 30,000 days. And, many of you are probably almost 20, so you've got, 15,000 out of the way, or let's say 10,000. Regardless of the number, you have a finite number of days left. And knowing that I have 20,000 days left, I want to live every single day. And every single day, you should learn something, you should teach something. Every single day, you should be a sponge, and you should never, ever be a full glass. What I mean by full glass is when you put more information into a full glass, it just pours out. Always be open to learning something from everyone. Knowing your days are limited, learning something and teaching something every day is probably a way to live in doing something that you're passionate about that'll give you happiness. And ultimately, in this crazy experiences in our life that we have here, the target has to be happy. And to be happy means to be healthy. And always, one final thing that I want to add on to that is every day as you're developing, you have to be better. Be better today than you were yesterday, and be better tomorrow than you were today. And better is always going to change, so don't worry. Sometimes if you step back, it's because you wanted to get better at drinking vodka tonight. And that is going to ultimately make you be better at studying on Monday because you understand and feel bad about losing a couple days. So remember your days are limited, and remember that every day you should have something to add to your baggage of experience.
Well, you definitely taught us something today, and I've definitely learned something today. So I think we're good. Thank you very much for being with us. And just stick around, and I invite the audience to approach either Vlad or myself if you have any questions later on. And thanks once more.
I want to say one thing. I learned something today, too. I learned that you should never give a candy bar to your adversary when you play tennis.
Well, I'm really glad I could teach you that. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you.